Hey folks, welcome to Seaway Whiskywire. Tonight on the bar, we've got the Earl Ade 8-year-old Canadian single malt whiskey. Stay tuned. Well, hey folks, thanks for coming back after the intro. I'm Tyler, and tonight on the bar, we've got ourselves another Canadian single malt with the Earl Ade's 8-year-old Canadian single malt whiskey. This release is from the Earl Ade Distillery, located on Prince Edward Island. The whiskey is actually sourced, though, from Ontario, from Last Straw Distillery. And you know me and Last Straw, we get along just fine. So what can I tell you guys about the Earl Ade 8-year-old Canadian single malt whiskey? It comes in with an ABV stamp of 40% ABV, non-chill filtered, no color added, just the way we like it, just like everything coming out of Last Straw. And it is, they claim it on the bottle here, double cast using bourbon and recharred American oak barrels, and then on the back it actually states that they finish it in ex-peated whiskey cask. So we got a pretty cool cask maturation process going into this. We're gonna get right into this. I'm gonna pop the top and we'll get into the pour. Actually, maybe what I'll do, let me just set that there. We'll let that acclimate and aerate out there. Let's talk about the presentation on the Earl Ade, and then we'll get into the color and all that kind of stuff. It's a classic Last Straw bottling here. I mean, looks just like most bottles from Last Straw. The cork's even the same. And just like Last Straw, they put a lot of information on here. There's a little bit of background on the selection of the casks, how it uses. They give you a little bit of, nosing and tasting notes on there. A bit of smokiness in there. They give you a little bit of background on the distillery for Earl Ade. New distillery starting up, I have no issue with them sourcing whiskey, and I mean sourcing from Last Straw Distillery. You've obviously done your homework, Earl Ade folks, and good on you to go out there and select something from Last Straw. I should also state that they did send this over to the channel for me to take a look at. So Earl Ade, thank you very much. I did not know at the time that it was sourced from Last Straw until I got it in the mail. So pretty cool in that. This is one of their first batch releases here, and once they get going with their own stuff, I'm really curious to see what comes out of that. And with that, let's get into the color of the Earl Ade 8-year-old Canadian single malt whiskey. Again, coming from Last Straw, all natural, no color added, non-chill filtration. There's little bits in there. 40% ABV. I imagine when they selected it, they wanted something that was approachable and easy to get into. And Don and the team over there do some fantastic stuff, and I'm sure they had no issue bringing this down to suit the needs of the folks over at Earl Ade. Beautiful color, deep bronze, really showing that those active casks that were used in there, the recharred American oak, ex-bourbon, and then the ex-peated whiskey barrels as well. Beautiful color. Yeah. All right. Well, give it some time to kind of acclimate here. Let's get in the nose and see what I can pull out of the Earl Ade 8-year-old Canadian single malt whiskey. Hopefully you got something good in your glass. Let's check out the nose. First off, lots and lots of wood notes in here. It's almost got a bit of a musty, damp basement kind of piece to it. Some musty leather, some books, old chair. I've kind of used that characteristic and description before. Cooked apples, really like stewed cooked apples and pears. Dusty fields, driftwood. Maybe a hint of citrus on the end there. It's more of an orange. A little bit of bitterness, a little bit of spice. I would almost chalk it up to some if you took like a cinnamon stick and you charred it before you put it into like an old fashioned, I kind of get those notes off the nose. Yeah. Interesting nose, kind of showing that, flexing that age note and that character based on the 8-year-old age stamp there, and just that profile. But it's a real musty, dusty, kind of old-timey smell. You get your nose right in there too. 40% ABV, nothing abrasive, nothing crazy like that. Yeah, it's just got a lot of character for an 8-year-old Canadian single malt. All right, well, legs are a little thin on it there, but I mean 40%. Let's get into the palate. We'll transition into that and see what we can pull out of the Earl Ade 8-year-old Canadian single malt whiskey. So, cheers to your health and sip the north. Here we go. Okay, so pretty thin liquid, not overly oily, doesn't hang on too long. there is some different flavor profiles. The palate does not align with the nose. Palate is much more vanilla focused. The apples are there again. They're red apples, not cooked or not stewed as before. Same with the pears. There is some pear in there too. The pears kind of are just a ripe pear and have nothing really after that. Transition into that, there's some bitter chocolate notes in there, some tobacco, some burnt caramel. I get a little bit of bitter oak in the back as well. I'm going to go for one more sip. Yeah, it's vanilla, apples, pears, a little bit of citrus in there, maybe a little bit of lemon, lime, maybe a little bit of orange, just a little bit. And then into that chocolate, tobacco, burnt caramel, bitter oak. You know, it's got this kind of, it does have that dampness to it, driftwoody, like a campfire with a bit of ash to it there. Not peat at all, but it's just that kind of like the charred wood in there. Maybe that's just the charred oak that's speaking to me there. But it does have this kind of like, again, the nose has that kind of musty basement, old leather chair, old timey kind of thing going on the nose. The palate is much more directed at that kind of sweet end at the beginning into that bitter component. The bitter component is really focused heavily on that chocolate and that tobacco and that burnt caramel and that bitter kind of oakness to it. You know, obviously active cask to get the color out of it there. I just think that you know, it might have been a bit too long. The bitterness is almost a little bit overpowering for me at the end. I'm going to go for one more sip and then we'll transition into the finish. I'll give you guys my final thoughts on the Earl Ade 8-year-old Canadian single malt whiskey. So one more sip and I'll give you my thoughts. Finish wise, it's a short finish at 40%. You know, I didn't really expect anything more than that. It's a little bit of, you know, and I don't like to say this out of coming from Last Straw, it's a little bit unbalanced. And I'll tell you, it's just because of that component of, you know, vanilla fruit into that bitter. The bitter component is just, it seems to be too much on it. The nose is a little bit off-putting to me. You know, it kind of has that reminiscent of like a chocolate malt. I'm not a big fan of that. They didn't mention anything about it being a chocolate malt, but because of those leather chair aspect of it too, it just kind of reminds me of that. And it's just almost overpowering. I've said the word bitter more in this review than I would care to talk about. I'm just not a big fan of bitter whiskeys. But you know, if you are, this might sing to you a little bit. We'll transition to the value proposition now. This is available online at Earl Ade's website. I'll put that down below, as well as Last Straw's website. You know, I'll put that down below. You can get this for $85 for it now. You know, Canadian single malt, 8 years of age. If the flavor profile that I'm describing here sings to you, I think you definitely should go out and try this. You know, for me, I would say skip this one and wait for the next one. I don't usually say that about, you know, up and coming distilleries. I would never, you know, normally say that about Last Straw because Last Straw is putting out some bangers. This one here just seems to be a little bit too on the unbalanced and experimental side of things for me. And you know, $85, it's a pretty high price point. But again, it's Canadian single malt at 8 years of age, but only at 40% at the floor. I think you should wait and see what comes out next from these guys here at Earl Ade. I'm not sure what they're working on. Maybe if they're watching the video, they can stick something down in the description below. Let me know what they're working on in the background or what's next in the iteration of their single malt whiskey or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different, something different from Last Straw, something different coming from going out to the east coast of Canada there at Prince Edward Island. I'm sure it's doing well out there. I'm just, I'm honestly, it's not my favorite. It's not, I wouldn't go as far as saying it's undrinkable. It's just not my favorite release from Last Straw or Earl Ade. But you know what, Canadian single malt, I appreciate it, and inviting you guys to sip the North as always and try some different stuff. They're not always going to be great, but I mean, this one here, it ain't great, but it ain't bad either. So there we go. That's my review of the Earl Ade 8-year-old Canadian single malt whiskey. Hope you enjoyed that. I'll stick all their information down below if you want to check them out. If this profile sings to you more so than it sang to me, wish you all the best to go out and grab it there. And if you like what we're doing here at Seaway Whiskey Wire, you guys know the drill. Like and subscribe down below. And hey, don't forget to check me out on Instagram at Seaway Whiskey Wire for more content. And if you guys are still hanging around this long in the video, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Love you guys hanging around with me, trying new stuff, trying some Canadian single malt in the basement on a rainy, dreary day here in the Seaway. This really brightens my spirits to come down and share my thoughts and opinions with you guys on here. So I appreciate your support and appreciate you guys tuning in as always. Well, that about wraps up for me, folks. I'm going to go finish up my dram of Earl Ade and probably get to some editing. I got a long trip on me this weekend, so a little bit early in filming, but hey, you know what? You'll still see this on Saturday, so it ain't really going to matter. And by then, I'll be on my business trip. So cheers to your health, and we'll see you around. Bye for now, folks.